The auditorium was hot and humming. Plastic chairs squeaked beneath anxious bodies, polyester sashes clung to sweat-damp necks, and lights glared in the eyes of the fidgeting graduates. Over the din, the principal called my name. Alan Cardoso, valedictorian for Engenharia de Computação, Terma de 2011. Dutiful applause. They all knew what was coming. I, after all, was the surprise speaker. It was my supposed moment. I stood and walked stiff-legged to the podium, clutching my sheet of notes so tightly that the paper curled at the edges. The school banner hung droopily behind me, the script peeling at one corner. I cleared my throat, a ripple of stifled laughter from the back row where my cousin Mauro and his friends slouched. My mother in the third row sat forward, knuckles pressed white against her purse. A hush fell. That silence, thick, restless, impatient, set my resolve bristling. I looked out over the sea of faces, some expectant, some bored, a few openly smirking, waiting for me to fail. I know, I began, that everyone here expects me to say how I'll join an engineering firm, or develop software for industry, or get my master's degree. Mauro snorted, the sound echoed sharp as a slap. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. I tried to steady myself. Instead, I want to talk about art, I said, and data, about telling stories through what we can measure and see, making numbers beautiful and meaningful. I believe data tells us more than we think. Gasps and suppressed giggles rolled through the crowd. Someone muttered, "La Vemile, here he goes again." I pressed on. I want to use code, statistics and graphics to capture the hidden stories, the city's pulses, the change in the air, the patterns of how we live. The vice principal cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, as if he wanted to interject or maybe end this spectacle. Mauro's voice cut sharp. "Vipe into planel her, Alan. Gonna paint spreadsheets, Alan." Laughter this time. Real laughter, and not just from him. My aunt Marianella looked away. My younger brother stared at the ground. The principal stepped forward, hand extended, face redder than before. "Thank you, Alan. Inspiring words. Let's continue to the next part." My speech ended there, applause reduced to meaningless claps. I returned to my seat, my heart a hollow drum, my vision swimming. I could feel their eyes, amused, pitying, dismissive. The graduation continued without me. At home, the story spread. At birthday lunches and churrascos, at the Sunday market, in the chats outside our worn townhouse in the middle of Boa Vista, they called me Artista dos Números, the little number artist. They told the story of how I disgraced myself at graduation. My uncle joked I should have worn a clown nose. The laughter I learned always found me. I left for São Paulo 2 months later. The city was sprawling, smog-streaked, loud, and for a while I felt invisible there. The apartment I rented was a tiled box with leaky windows and constant traffic noise. I took odd jobs. Cleaned up datasets for a logistics company, automated boring Excel reports, tried to sell infographics to consultants. Every night at the cracked kitchen table, I lost myself in code, tinkering with charts that glowed on my battered laptop. I drew old buses from Ixonaut, colored by the routes they took each week, mapped rainfall patterns against hospital admissions, turned lists of soccer results into shifting waves of blue and green. The jobs paid little. I lived on noodles and cheap coffee. Once I called home hoping for encouragement. Instead, my mother sighed, "Talvez voce deves tenta concurso. Maybe you should take the civil service exams." My brother on another call didn't mention my work at all. "Voce ainda desenha esses graficos I," he once asked, but didn't wait for my answer. When I visited on holidays, Mauro made grand gestures of counting beans or plotting his barbecue recipe on a graph for comic effect. The years blended together. Sometimes I doubted everything. At the data company, my work was ignored. My savings crumbled. I grew thin, pale, silent. In the 5th year, something cracked open. I posted one of my passion projects, a spectral map of Curitiba's public parks showing the city's air pollution ebb and flow on an online design forum, reluctant and embarrassed. It went unnoticed for days. But then a comment, terse and unsigned, "Contact me." The message was from a curator, Mariana Borges from Lisbon. She ran a networked exhibit on urban narratives. Her words, "Your data artwork caught my breath. Would you be interested in showing this?" For a day I sat motionless. I read the email 30 times, then I wrote back yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. In Lisbon, I heard my work called transformational. I stood in a white-walled gallery as people examined my maps of sonic footprints in Curitiba's night, parents and children tracing the colored lines with their fingers. Some wept. I was interviewed for a podcast. I was paid and paid well. From there, commissions followed, a piece for a digital museum in Seoul on urban loneliness, another for a New York collective about subway migrations, and a sprawling interactive mural in São Paulo. The projects spun outward, invitations to speak, to teach, to collaborate flooded in. My inbox became a window to distant continents. I split my time between cities. I upgraded my battered laptop. I stopped calling home as often, but sometimes in lulls on midnight flights, I'd look at photos of the hills around Curitiba and feel their gravity, a quiet pull. Brazilian journalists started calling, one, two, then more. My mother emailed suddenly, proud at last, with a link to an article on me in O Globo. One evening she wrote, "Avisen Ana de seque TV na TV," my Aunt Marianella added. It must have been fate. Mauro sent a single message, "Nice one, primo." But I wasn't ready to return, not yet. The wound wasn't closed. 7 years after I left, the city invited me to create a public installation for the upcoming Cultural Week. They'd seen my international work. The email was formal, name misspelled, but the details were clear. A centerpiece in Praça Tiradentes, the heart of Curitiba. My data, my vision, my narrative, visible to everyone. I accepted. Coming back was unsettling. The airport felt tighter, staler than I remembered. The taxi radio played 1990s sertanejo, crackling between static. Clouds pressed low over the city, dragging ragged curtains of rain. Familiar buildings looked tired. I passed the old school where the auditorium windows still flickered with assembly lights. I rented a flat in the centro for the week, too close to home to avoid ghosts, not close enough to be smothered. Each day I rehearsed my pitch with city officials, refined the digital displays, supervised carpenters who were skeptical of all my cables and projections. They built the screen in the middle of the square. Each night I couldn't sleep. On the afternoon of the reveal, clouds hung heavy and bruised. Market stalls ringed the praça and students with matching blue t-shirts milled about, munching on pastel and biting churros. As word spread, a crowd gathered. Cameras blinked atop tripods, my palms sweated, my email pinged with last-minute adjustments. Standing behind the console I saw them, my mother clutching a cheap black umbrella and beside her Uncle Francisco, broad and stooped. Marianella with her orange coat blinking away drizzle, and further back Mauro, arms folded, wearing the same old soccer jacket. Behind was a mix of the old neighborhood. Dona Vera, who ran the bakery, my brother and his toddler daughter, even the vice principal from my old school, sparse-haired but unmistakable. Other parents, neighbors, classmates, all craning their necks, uncertain what they'd come to see. A nervous city official ushered me up to the microphone, my words nearly tangled, but I found my footing. "I wanted," my voice stronger than it felt, "to show you Curitiba as I've always seen it, not just a map but a living, breathing organism. Every jog in Bosque do Alemo, every bus ride down República Argentina, every shift in the weather, these are the city's stories. We think numbers are dry, but to me, what we measure is what we cherish." So I turned Curitiba's everyday data into light, form and color. The screens flickered, the official nodded. I pressed the first button. Above the plaza, a canopy of interlinked displays dove into life. Streams of color moved, reds for foot traffic on weekday mornings, deep greens for the night soundscape near Lago de Ordem, gold threads mapping cyclist routes. Rainfall sang across the city's districts, with waves of azure shrinking and expanding in real time. Images, drawn from municipal datasets, social media, sensor networks, bloomed, merged, transformed. The surge of Curitiba's daily life sparkled across geometries that pulsed in time to ambient sound, shifting with each passing tram or market vendor's call. The crowd was silent. Not the giggling, restless silence of my graduation, but a listening, collective hush. The air hummed with rain and light. An older woman, my elementary teacher, lifted her hand, squinting at yellow orbs that swept across the upper quadrant. "That's my street, isn't it?" she whispered. My mother pressed toward the front, face streaming silent tears. My brother, expressionless, lifted his daughter so she could see the undulating shapes that showed the city's parks breathing in real time. And then Mauro, he didn't laugh, he didn't smirk or fold his arms tight. He moved forward, his eyes following the storylines mapping soccer games played across neighborhood fields. He called out softly, "Olha só me." "Look at that, Mom," to Marianella, for once not feigning bravado. His mouth was open, eyes bright with wonder. Other voices followed. "Eacute Benito demais. How did he do that? Isso eacute Curitiba mesmo." Loggers and skeptics and old neighbors all, seeing the city as they'd never imagined it. Some found themselves in the data. One market worker recognized the ebb and flow of foot traffic as her morning commute. A group of schoolchildren traced the colored lines with their fingers, giggling at the patterns their own homes made on the map. Reporters clicked photos. A local TV anchor asked for an interview live as the square filled with faces wrapped with interest, no derision. In that moment, the years of hunger and loneliness, of sleeping in windowless apartments, of laughter echoing at my back, flooded through me and vanished. In its place, that sweet, thrilling silence, the silence that comes when a room or a plaza or an entire city holds its breath as one. When the projections faded, applause rose, not polite, not obligatory, real, sustained, warm. I tried to bow, but a threshold tremble held me standing. My mother reached the front, hugging me with such force that the breath left my lungs. Behind her, my family closed in. Uncle Francisco, usually sparing with words, clapped me on the shoulder. "Your grandfather would have loved this," he said, voice thick. Marianella, once the first to tease, offered to bring brigadeiros over to my new apartment, laughing but with pride sharpening her words. Mauro simply squeezed my arm. "Disculpa, Alan," he said, voice low. "EU now via agora EU vijo." Later, as the crowd thinned and the officials began to disassemble the displays, I lingered on the plaza, watching the city's ordinary evening unfold. Cyclists weaving through puddles, old women gossiping under awnings, a stray dog sniffing a trash can, the dull thrum of Curitiba familiar and beloved. That night my family gathered in the cramped apartment. No one mentioned the jokes or the years of distance. We ate, laughed, shared stories. My niece crawled onto my lap and asked if I could paint the sky again with computers. I said maybe I could. I took out my laptop, let her press the keys, and watched as colors filled the screen. I did not need to say much. The city, the work, the light and data, it all spoke louder than any speech I'd ever given. There was at last a peace among us, a silence of acceptance and understanding. That was the return, not triumphant, not dramatic, simply true. I had brought something back, pulled from my years away, and laid it at their feet. They saw, and for the first time, they understood that art could be made from the world they lived in, the world I loved. And in the gentle hush that followed, I was home.